Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the future, our collective well-being, and our one shared home planet. I'm Corinna Bellizzi. Before we begin, I want to share something personal. Over the past year, this community has supported reforestation through our partnership with Forest Planet, and together we've planted almost 40,000 trees. That's nearly double what our plan had been for 2025, and well before the end of the year. This is a legacy I'll always be proud of, but as we continue to grow, I'm turning our focus to the health of another ecosystem, our academic and civic commons. Today, I'm proud to announce our new cause partnership today through 2026 with Prescott College. Prescott College is a progressive liberal arts school whose roots run deep in social and environmental justice, and where I'm currently earning my PhD in sustainability education. Their goal is simple: to create problem solvers like you and me who lead the way to a just and sustainable world. Prescott College stands with diversity. They stand with equity and inclusion and free inquiry. And like many institutions that foster open dialogue and academic freedom, it's facing pressure from forces that would rather silence complexity than engage with it. Why do they seek to silence colleges that focus on creating interdisciplinary, experiential, and diverse learning environments? Because this type of learning awakens critical thinkers and problem solvers. People who think critically are hard to control and harder to silence. So educational centers like Prescott College are earmarked as the, quote, enemy within, because they create thoughtful leaders, not blind servants. So this episode is both professional and personal, because free speech, the freedom to question and the freedom to learn are all foundations of a sustainable future. Now, I want to pause and talk for a moment about something that has really pushed this into current media. By now, most of us have seen the harrowing footage of Charlie Kirk's assassination while speaking at Utah Valley University in early September. The tragedy itself was devastating, but what followed has opened a chilling new chapter in America's struggle with free expression. Federal workers revoked visas for foreigners who celebrated the event online. Workers were fired for offhand comments that they shared on social media. And lawmakers on both sides used the moment to call for tighter speech controls. Moments like this test our commitment to freedom. It's easy to defend speech we like, but it's much harder and far more necessary to protect the speech we dislike, because censorship rarely arrives shouting. It slips in quietly, disguised as policy, safety, or civility. And when that happens, our public square starts to shrink, one quiet omission at a time. When people are punished for words or for the tone of their words, everyone around them learns the same lesson. You'd better stay safe. You'd better be quiet. And most dangerous censorship isn't the headline-grabbing ban that's going to get your attention. It's the silent one. It's the shadow ban, the algorithmic suppression that so many on the left are now experiencing, the story that never trends because it never sees daylight. And when our jobs, reputations, and communities live inside these digital walls, that chill touches every conversation we have. So let's talk about one of the hardest lines to walk: how much you can or should share your views when they conflict with your employers or your loved ones. There's no one-size-fits-all rule, but there are some guiding principles that I think can help us all. And we need to understand when our views or desires to speak out via social media may compete with things like our employers' policies and our ability to remain gainfully employed in a tightening job market. So number one, know your boundaries. Read your employment policies. Understand whether public statements tie back to your company's brand. Choose your battleground. That's number two. Ask yourself, is this really at the center of my values, or is it just something I want to debate? Don't let yourself be rage baited into a response. Sometimes private dialogue is more powerful than a public post. And sometimes you just need a break from all media. Know when to shut off the deluge. And number three, redefine what not safe for work or NSFW means. It doesn't just mean explicit content. It means emotionally or politically charged content that can compromise professional relationships. 4, prepare for pushback. If you speak up, do it with documentation, respect, and awareness. Remember, civility is not a weakness. It can actually be your armor. Imagine, let's just say this person is named Sarah. She works at a tech firm that prides itself on diversity and inclusion. One day she disagrees with a public statement the company makes. She posts her critique on her personal account and social media. On LinkedIn or wherever, it doesn't really matter. Within hours, HR calls her in, and now she's at a crossroads. Does she delete the post? Does she double down? Or does she find a private path to express this dissent without burning bridges? Integrity doesn't always mean public rebellion. Sometimes it means just choosing your moment, choosing it wisely, choosing it strategically. Maybe you have a podcast like mine and you can use this as a pulpit. But if you don't, think about where you want your voice to be heard, where it can make the most impact. Perhaps as simple as attending a protest in your neck of the woods, or perhaps also you have a quiet bit of, what do you want to call this? A quiet piece of rebellion, like these simple earrings that I'm wearing today. Blue folding chairs. I hope you'll think about that for a moment. Think about what your communication strategy can be. How do you want to resist? How can you uniquely have your voice heard? How can you make an impact in your community? How can you make an impact and support of other people? I'm going to take a break now and come back in just a moment. Here's a word from our sponsors. Now I'd like to transition to talking about the right to protest. If we acknowledge that speech is essential, protest is its echo in motion. Throughout history, peaceful protest, from civil rights marches to climate strikes, has driven human progress. But today we're seeing a tightening of that right. In the wake of the No Kings protests, which started in June and which continue this October, and the anti-ICE demonstrations, new restrictions and policing tactics are raising the stakes. Some protesters face felony charges. Others are labeled domestic extremists or domestic terrorists simply for marching. When the cost of dissent is criminalization, freedom becomes a privilege, not a right. But we can still object peacefully. We can write, we can paint, we can organize locally, we can speak. The medium matters less than the motive. We can protest. And when protest grows from compassion rather than rage, when it is peaceful, it becomes a bridge instead of a barricade. Now, there is also data that supports a rise in peaceful protest being directly tied to the fall of oligarchy, to the fall of what are dictatorships around the globe. So it's important that we remain engaged too, that we know when we can peacefully protest, and that we seek to quell the fire if there are instigators on site. We can anticipate instigators coming from the other side of the aisle to try and incite violence. And we can do our part too in quieting that calm, getting that calm to really engage. Let's talk about when to self-censor and when to speak. Here's where things can get personal. When do you hold your tongue? And when do we each release the words that seem like they're burning to be said? There's a difference between self-censorship and self-control. Self-censorship is fear. Self-control is wisdom. So ask yourself, am I silenced because I'm afraid or because I'm choosing the right time to be heard? What's my goal? Is it to inform, to provoke, or to connect? If I speak, am I ready to stand on my words calmly, even under fire? And finally, can I express my truth without dehumanizing someone else? Choosing restraint can be an act of love. Speaking truth can be an act of service. The art lies in knowing what the moment really calls for. There is value in open debate. We need open debate, not shouting matches, not echo chambers, dialogue. This means not letting yourself be rage baited. When we shut out dissent, we weaken our collective intelligence. When we stay curious, when we lean into questions, we strengthen it. Back in 2022, I spoke with Tony Brasunas. He was the author of Red, White, and Blind. He offered a concept that resonates: media consciousness. It's the idea that awareness itself is an antidote to propaganda, that by cultivating a balanced media diet, we break free from deception. Let's listen to a clip from this episode. This is Tony Brasunas describing what he calls the new enlightenment.
In Red, White, and Blind, which the goal of the book is not to be the Democrats' book or the Republicans' book. It's meant to look at this from a more holistic standpoint. And the state that you just mentioned is literally what Red, White, and Blind is meant to convey. We're all in this state of deception. We're all in this state of being deceived. And generally, we don't even know it. Or even when we know it, it's still not as easy to get out of it as we think. And that's creating this division in the country where if you just get in sort of your red news and you just read that, you have one vision of what the problem is, what's good, what's bad, what to fear, what to hope for. If you're just reading the blue news, it's the same. You get the same, here's your enemies you're supposed to hate. Here's the news that you're supposed to believe. Here's what you're supposed to hope for and all of that.
And now social media only feeds us the news that we want to see or the perspectives that we already have. So we're becoming stupider. I mean,
yeah, stupider, or at the very least, possibly stupider. It's an interesting way to put it, but certainly more divided, right? Certainly less aware. And I think that's what you're getting at, less aware of what the actual truth is, what is actually true in the world. And so because of that, my real hope with Red, White, and Blind, I spend about half the book through examples and sort of telling stories and showing how bad the problem is, how much deception there is, and how many of the stories we think we know about are actually, we have a completely often distorted view of them. And then I spend sort of the second half of the book talking about what to do about it, and a little bit of a pep talk and a little bit of a self-help book. I try to do it a little bit like I talk about a balanced media diet and about ways that we can break out of this, and actually that it's already happening. And that the good news is that the new enlightenment is already here unfolding. And we're moving into a world where we can know for the first time in the history of humanity, we can know what is going on in the world. That's actually never been true before. Like I trace back, I go back to the Dark Ages and sort of feudalism and the Catholic Church and how they controlled this distribution of information. Then we moved into the Enlightenment, the First Enlightenment. And then throughout sort of the free press as it existed in the 1700s, 1800s, then what I call the century of propaganda, basically 1920 to 2020. And we're just sort of coming out of the century of propaganda right now. So it's a very exciting, but also very confusing time to figure things out, for sure.
So where do people go to build that balanced media diet? Are there particular publications that you're seeing now that you feel offer a broader perspective?
So what I do is I actually go back in history and look at the original vision of the free press. And when the free press was put in the Constitution, it wasn't that there would be this sense of one or two sources that would be objective and would be truthful. That was never the case, and that's not the case now. The century of propaganda began in the 1920s with this idea of professional objective journalism. It's actually a myth. It was created to justify the consolidation of media ownership. Because at the time in the 1920s, or in the 19 teens, we're coming out of the muckraker era. And Ida Tarbell and Upton Sinclair and some of these people were writing the early investigative journalism, the early exposés that were really sort of taking apart early corporate power, Standard Oil, all of that. And they realized that the way they needed to fight this, or the way they chose to fight this, was to try to buy up all the newspapers. It was the first time newspapers were lucrative. So pardon me, I'm going to go a little bit into history here. And so what ended up happening is they came up with this idea of journalism schools. The journalists will be professionals. And so they founded all of the journalism schools started in like the 19 teens, like, Columbia and Missouri and all these sort of the more prestigious journalism schools. And what that did is it justified saying, look, we're going to have one newspaper in the city, but it's okay because it's going to be objective. These are going to be professional journalists. Whereas before that, there was always, every city would have dozens of newspapers. There'd be like the Italians newspaper, the Democrats newspaper, the newspaper of people that were, suffragettes or the abolitionists. So we're actually moving back into that time. And it's a little bit disorienting, but we're moving back into a time where every perspective has its own voice. So what I do with the balanced media diet, rather than try to say, here's this one source that is always truthful and objective, and if you just go watch this source, you're going to get the story, it doesn't exist. And I'm here to say, it was hard to realize that Santa Claus didn't exist and there was no like elf bringing us gifts every year. And in the same thing, we have to realize that there is no one objective source of news. And so the balanced media diet, I reviewed hundreds of news sources and I basically culled it down to 40. And what I propose is a different set of sources each day of the week. And if you've got 30 minutes, then I say pick these 2 sources each day. And so over the course of 7 days, you get 14 different sources. If you've got an hour, then I add 2 more each day. And if you've got 2 hours, I add 2 more. So most people probably don't have 2 hours, but if you want to become a journalist or you want to become then do that. The idea is that in order for us to overcome two issues, one is the fact that we're in this deceived state. And the other is the political divisions that we have, this sort of bifurcation of society. In order to move past that, we have to be able to understand other perspectives. So, there's these controversial issues, right? There's abortion or there's gun rights or there's the vaccines and all these things. It doesn't mean you have to change your mind about those ideas. But by understanding what the other side says, rather than them being the enemy, the people that think differently about controversial issues are the enemy. They're lesser humans. They should be, or they're coming for us. I mean, that's literally what they're saying on both sides, is to understand that viewpoint and say, okay, I don't agree with it, but now I can understand it. So that's the first part. And the other part is that through doing that, we actually hone our own minds to be able to understand things more deeply and overcome what you just said. We're becoming stupider. We become smarter. Our brains, just like a balanced food diet, is bracing for the body. And at first you don't want to eat that stuff or you want to eat more of this other stuff, but your body starts to engage with it and you become more healthy. It's bracing to the body. It's invigorating. It's the same with challenging your mind with unfamiliar ideas. Your mind gets invigorated.
That right there is why conversation matters. We don't have to agree on everything, but we do need to listen, because listening, truly listening, is an act of courage. It's also how we build bridges wide enough for truth to walk across. It's how we open our arms and join with neighbors as opposed to just always being in opposition. And really, this is at the root of the problem we face in America today. We are too used to pointing fingers at one another, and too seldom do we reach out and really seek to understand what one another truly believes. It's easy to dismiss someone as an enemy when you don't understand their motivations, when you don't understand the reason behind their fear, because fear is what is driving the MAGA movement. Fear of loss of the resources you had, fear of loss of family, fear of loss of job, fear of loss of future. White men in particular have started to feel as though they were second-class citizens in our society. And even though that has never been true, they feared that enough, that the white supremacy culture of America reared its ugly head in a way that many of us never anticipated we would see. Those of us who thought that we were entering a world where racism could actually become something of the past have learned that our fears were manipulated by government officials. They preyed on people who didn't know better. And sadly, their tactics really worked. And this has meant that some of the least popular policies of the last century are now being enacted upon citizens and immigrants, some of whom were here legally and some of whom were not, because the color of their skin is dark and they may have an accent. We're rolling back laws that protected people. We're making this country a less safe space to live. This is a chilling period to live in. And I'm in it with you. I'm in it with all of you. This is perhaps the first time I have used no filters. You're seeing my home office. I don't have a green screen because it didn't feel like today covering this topic I could show you anything but the raw, naked truth of me. So today, we've covered a lot. We've covered the chilling aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination, the tension between personal belief and professional risk, the fact that we need to seek to find a balance that will work for us to help get us through this really tough period, the rights and responsibilities of protest, the dance we face between silence and speech, and the power of having an open civil dialogue. If you take one thing away from today's episode, I hope it can be this. Free speech is a living system. And like all truly living systems, all regenerative systems, it needs care, it needs balance, and it needs sunlight. The goal should not be to speak louder, it's to speak more clearly. It's to use your voice for good. It's to ensure that when you do speak, you're telling the truth. You're not spreading a meme that is on, let's just say, questionable basis of fact. So often now, those rage bait instances are what drive the difference between us, drive the separation. And when we're separated, the only individuals who really win are the companies who have now been treated as if they're individuals, and the ultra wealthy, the 0.1%. The laws today benefit them. They don't benefit you and me. The benefits we receive of being part of the society, we pay taxes. A lot of us pay a very high tax. And we don't necessarily take from the system when we pay those taxes. But I look at our infrastructures today, the crumbling road on my street, the fact that so little seems to come back to community. We need to question things like the build of a palace, a palatial ballroom at the White House, a new Arc de Triomphe, or should I say Drumpf, in front of, basically in Washington, D.C. on the Virginia side. This is in the works. He essentially is making an Arc de Triomphe that is colloquially called the Arc de Trump by some in media now. He's spending our tax dollars this way, not to support Americans. And I can't see how that is an American first policy, especially as we're bailing out foreign governments like the Argentinians, while our farmers here in the States can't stay in business because tariffs have killed their business. These are dark times. If we know that the goal isn't to speak louder, it's to speak more clearly, it's to speak with truth, it's to speak about things we know and care about, as opposed to those that we're distracted by and simply rage baited into. I want you to use your voice with integrity, with empathy, and with a curiosity that's strong enough to survive disagreement. So the next time you feel that inner voice asking, should I say this? Take a breath, check your motives, And if your words come from truth and care, if the intention is to invite the person you're talking to care a little more so we can create a better world together, then say them. That's how we keep this fragile ecosystem of ideas alive. Now, as we close, I want to come back to why this conversation matters so much. Freedom of speech isn't just a political right. It's the soil that nurtures innovation, creativity, and truth. Because when we silence voices in our classrooms, when we punish curiosity in our workplaces, when we do these things, we erode the very ground from which sustainability must grow. This is also connected to why my new cause partnership with Prescott College feels like such a natural evolution for this show. They've championed environmental stewardship and social justice for over half a century. This will, in fact, be their 60th year anniversary in 2026. And they remain steadfast in their belief that education and free inquiry are inseparable. If you believe in that too, and learning that liberates, not limits, I invite you to join me in supporting their work. Together, we really can build a future that values truth, dialogue, and care for people, for planet, and for each other. Because when we care more, we really can be better. With that, thank you for listening. I hope you'll join me next week when we return to our interview format.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.